Happy Friday. Welcome
Happy
to
Friday.
Rewriting the Narrative.
Yes, hello, happy Friday. How is your Friday going thus far?
It is off to a swimmingly good start. Today was hair wash day, and we do have our tech back. So if you guys are watching video, you can see we got the hair wash day situation. So anyway, how's your day going?
It's going super good so far. Yeah, it's going very good. Very good. Lots of things in progress and all good. I have no complaints. Nothing that's worth complaining about.
Moving right along then, both
Yeah.
of us. So speaking of topic today, um, I get this. I mean, it is something we encounter all the time. Working with women, um, birth control and goals of pregnancy, and what are we thinking? What would we suggest if you are currently on birth control and wanting to get pregnant within the next year or so? And I think at this point, like when women start like having these questions, they are ready to move right along. And that's what we want to talk about today is what moving along looks like and our recommendations, considerations, and definitely go back to last week's podcast because or 2 weeks ago, whenever this comes out, because we talked about some of the more kind of nutrition related things, training related things, mindset things moving into pregnancy. But now we want to talk about more that preconception, period.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the questions that there's a lot of questions that I know that I get. Like, one is, will my period come back right away? Or it will take months, which I think, like, in that question, in and of itself, there's a lot of nuance too. Like, even just the part of, will my period come back right away? Knowing that they may bleed rather quickly after stopping oral hormonal contraceptive or having their IUD removed. But I think that's one question I get. And then I think another question that I often get is, you probably like nutrients with regards to like prenatals and things like that. So if somebody asked you, Sarah, sorry, don't mean to just like put you on the spot like that, but if somebody asked you, I'm on oral birth control and I want to get pregnant, will my period come back right away, or could this take months?
I would tell her, well, we don't know. I would love to have a crystal ball and I would love to tell you, exactly what's going to happen. I would definitely start the conversation probably the same as you would with just like a quick rehash of what hormonal birth control does. Just that this pill, as designed, shuts down that communication between your brain and ovaries, and with that you are not ovulating. So it's not that our goal is to get your period back like as the quote target, but we're trying to restore ovulation, right? So because that's how we're going to actually release that egg and have an egg to be fertilized for that pregnancy goal. So that would kind of be like that first conversation, and having the dialogue around, okay, like just because we bleed doesn't mean that you're ovulating yet, and these are kind of what we're going to be kind of looking for moving forward here to restore your cycle. And then I would also want to start with what were things like before we went on birth control if I didn't already have that information.
Yeah, I think like that's hugely important, is why they were on or put on birth control to begin with. Because here again, especially when we're talking about conception, we're talking about more than just bleeding. We're talking about, like you said, ovulation, the health of that egg, which in and of itself, we have to remember that if we're having ovulating this month, that egg's health has been developing for the last 90 so days. And so even though we may come off birth control and have a bleed, we really want to be thinking about the quality of that egg, which is months before. And this goes to that question of how long they've been on birth control to what we could see. And I think this is also too where in that conversation we should be thoughtful, and if coaches are listening, we really want to be very robust in our dialogue of possibilities, because like Sarah said, like we don't have a crystal ball. And as much as we are very hopeful that somebody does have a breakthrough bleed when they initially stop any type of birth control or come off an IUD, we also, I think both of us have experienced where somebody's had a breakthrough bleed and that was kind of it. And so I think opening up that door of a conversation of what things looked like before. Did they even have like a regular menstrual cycle? How old were they? Because that pill, regardless of the reason, whether if it was just because perhaps they wanted to be sexually active and prevent pregnancy at the time, or perhaps it was symptom management. And arguably, that pill could be masking a hormone dysregulation that they had early on. And maybe that hormone dysregulation was actually, I'm going to say air quotes if you're not watching, because perhaps they were just starting to ovulate. And as we know, those first formidable years of an ovulation can be very symptomatic with regards to very high unopposed estradiol. So I absolutely agree. Like having that conversation about why you're being put on birth control is really important, because that's going to tease out perhaps things that arguably may not have gone away. They just have been suppressed, because I think it also is important to know that I think for whatever reason, a lot of people think that hormone birth control, and I think because of the names, this is a low dose. I think that they think that a hormonal birth control isn't a lot of hormones, but it actually is, because it's, as Sarah said, it's suppressing. It's a feedback loop. So you're actually taking quite a lot of hormone, even though there's variable degrees of that to suppress that. And so how your body responds, coming off of a hormone birth control is going to be, very different from perhaps somebody else. And I think this goes into that facilitating what expectations can be and should be with regards to timeline of pregnancy, and how important it is during this time to get curious and to get lab work, to start, and this is something you'll go into later, going into remineralizing and revitaminizing, renutrienting the body, because I think that that's something that a lot of people think that, if they stop this contraception, and they start, pop, 2 prenatals for, 14 days, and all of a sudden they're, repleted again. And that's not how depletion works or repletion.
Well, and that's where I would even encourage women, like, I started this like, okay, I'm on birth control. I want to get pregnant within the year. Don't wait. Ideally, everyone's situation is different, but don't wait until you wanted to get pregnant yesterday to be thinking about coming off like the pill. Like this is something that we do want to prep for, just for, again, like that best case scenario as far as outcome, your health, just, and your mental health, as well. I think giving yourself that space is really helpful, especially during and talking about, this topic specifically. And you mentioned that 90 days. I would say that's a good maybe target, is like kind of thinking about that like prep, either to come off the pill or like that transition phase, like having like, okay, I'm gonna have like a 90-day transition phase, in your head. And, and this isn't to like scare people, because we know women that get pregnant immediately, coming off the pill. For that matter, we know women have gotten pregnant on the pill, right? So everyone's journey is going to be unique. For others, it may take a year to, get your cycle back. Like I've had, it take a year and a half, for clients, and that just kind of depends, on their health history. And this is where we do recommend getting some baseline lab work even before coming off that pill. So if possible, getting a baseline, your CMP, CBC, lipids, that full thyroid panel. We want to look at iron, ferritin. We want to look at, I'm not going to rattle off everything, but did I say full thyroid? I think I did, because she's so important. But we do definitely want to just kind of check under the hood and see if there's anything kind of glaring there that maybe needs to be supported before coming off, the pill. And then I would say roughly, like, again, maybe like 12 to 16 weeks after coming off the pill, looking at getting that full workup, again, this time really making sure that we are getting estrogen, progesterone, as well, FSH, LH, etc., and see what hormones are doing now that we are off the pill. But yeah, I think it's just really important to know that nothing in the body works in isolation. So we are looking to really support every system.
Yeah. I think that one thing that you said that I really just want to encourage you, any coach or, person that's listening to this, is that time piece. And I think that, arguably it can feel like a lot of work, to which, I said to one of my clients, not related to this, earlier this week, I was like, yes, looking after ourselves is a lot of work. It requires attention. But I think that, when we're having this conversation with somebody who's on a birth control and who does want fertility, which is the opposite of birth control, it can feel, like you said, like there's a lot of pressure on them, and it's very daunting because they arguably, can feel like they're doing so much prep work. And, to your point earlier, for some women, absolutely ovulation can return, 4-6 weeks post birth control, right? But for others, depending on the previous and why we have to do our due diligence, and depending on the type of birth control, like if you're, most people, some people don't even know what Depo-Provera, the injection, was, but something like that, it could be like 18 plus months for some women, and that was rather typical. And I just think that this is where Sarah and I always want to lead with abundance as opposed to scarcity. Make sure the client feels like they are in the driver's seat of all the cool things they can feel. And I'm going to use the word feel in charge of, and feel like they can control, because so much during this time can feel outside of their control. And I think that, this is where, one, when someone makes a decision that, hey, you know what, I want to pivot my goal to fertility as opposed to avoidance of fertility, and then saying, okay, awesome, let's create a plan. Like you said, let's get some lab work. Let's make a plan for some repeat lab work. And then in between that time, we're doing our due diligence of repleting the body. And to your point with labs, that can uncover so many like small things, or not even small, but big rocks, such as like thyroid. Blood sugar is a really big thing that can
Vitamin D. We were just talking about that, on a call yesterday, like with our mentees, like seeing low vitamin D, the ripple effect that has on energy, on hormone production, and that could be smaller potatoes, and something to support. And I apologize to cut you off there, but I was going to get into, because I just it can be an exciting thing too in time, and a time for curiosity. And I really just encourage anyone listening to, like, just coaches, women looking to become pregnant, approaching this from that place of curiosity, I think is a lot healthier mentally and more helpful as far as, just action and results. So especially, for I would say for a lot of women, like if you've been on the pill, you've probably been on it for several years. And, maybe for a good portion of, your, maybe early years, maybe early 20s. And what I really love recommending during this time is to take it as a time to increase your body literacy and better understand your body, especially as a female with a body that is cyclical and has fluctuations, throughout, the month. And that, idea of, this is something that you haven't experienced. So you haven't had this time to be in tune with your body in this way for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on, the woman and how long, she was on birth control. So yes, that can maybe seem overwhelming, but it can also be that place of curiosity and knowing that, okay, like, this is some biofeedback that I'm now going to be able to tap into. And I always suggest Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. I just feel like it is the book that we all should have had in middle school, high school, whether or not you even want to become pregnant. I think it's an amazing book to really just learn about, some of that biofeedback, like cervical mucus patterns, basal body temperature, what ovulation even is and why it matters. It's a good, just really good resource to have. It's a way to kind of, again, like kind of educate yourself and then notice things, in your own body.
Yeah, I'm gonna riff off of what you just said because right now relationships are really front of mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
Community is very front of mind for me, and it doesn't take one to tango. So I'm gonna say, like, riffing off of what Sarah said is like taking this as an opportunity to be in tune and get curious with your body and maybe arguably put more focus on yourself. I hate to say we always need a reason, but sometimes, we need a purpose or we always need a purpose. And when that purpose shifts to creation of life, that during this time, regardless of, how you're bringing this, life into this world, I think doubling down on that relationship with whomever your partner is and looking after their health, her health, his health, however, again, this is going down for you. This can be a community, a relationship building time for you both. If this is male female relationship, then obviously looking at his sperm quality, etc., is really really important. But I would say this is not a judgmental time for each other, but a time for curiosity and a time for discussion. And I think this could be again a very cool time for a couple.
Absolutely. It's that idea of like creation as a whole that I like to encourage. Like, what are we like? Okay, yes, we're goal creating a baby, but we're also creating a body, that is, healthy and strong for that baby,
Mhm.
for, conception. We're also creating a relationship, that's strong. We're creating more awareness with our body, and how to support it, which I did want to get into that a little bit because the one of the big things that we're always talking about is nutrition and like just the power of micronutrients. And one of those big things to know about like birth control, right, is everything we do has a side effect, desired effect, and maybe not so desired effect. And birth control does deplete you of some nutrients and some nutrients that are actually key ones for fertile health. So I would recommend, if you are not already supplementing, considering some supplements that birth control is known to, deplete you of. So I'm thinking like B vitamins is going to be like one of the biggest ones that I always like to look at. How about you?
I so love B vitamins. I mean, I would say fertility or not, that's people need to listen up to this if you're on birth control. I do like right now I'm on my omega kick again. Not
Yeah.
necessarily like there's a direct correlation with depletion there, but I do see that that is one area I've seen a lot for anybody that's just really needed. I will say the vitamin D thing probably would be the one that I would be a little bit more direct on. But again, with vitamin D, I do think we should test as opposed to just supplement with. So I'll go with omegas off of yours.
Yeah, I would say like magnesium. That's another
Mhm.
one is that I'm thinking of another one that the birth control pill does deplete you of. So those, I mean, if you like started with that, that's pretty solid. I did want to mention because Legion is actually having a sale right now. If you are listening to this when episode is released, and one thing I do really like about their B complex is it has CoQ10 in it. And
Oh,
CoQ10 is going to be a good one for egg quality. And
yeah.
this is one like your husband could take too, like B vitamins, CoQ10, great for sperm health as well. But yeah, definitely. And you can use code FORD if you check it out for free shipping. But getting that magnesium, getting your lab testing done, seeing if you need some vitamin D, omegas, that Mare mentioned. Um, and then, from there, it's going to be like what maybe do those baseline labs show that you might need, a little bit more support, with. Like if we are seeing thyroid downregulation, for example, maybe then we want to look at, some selenium. If we are, seeing liver, stress, maybe we need to either look at diet, or, supplementation to just support that liver and detoxification.
Yeah, I was actually gonna just a note on the B vitamin lesion. I just looked it up because I wasn't sure. One thing that is very important for this is pregnancy, so go back to your previous episode. But a good thing about this one, and you do have to watch because not all supplements are obviously created equal, but it does have a nice amount of choline in it. Obviously, once we're talking about actual pregnancy, this is different, but I definitely say that's one thing too outside of like those omegas that I think would be definitely a good toolbox to have is something like that has choline in it for sure.
Yeah, and then, well, yeah, because we like to think about, I mean, supplements, but then even food. And I do think this is a cool time, back to that curiosity. How can I, like, what in my diet could I maybe change? Maybe, again, like we work with a lot of women, and this came up actually yesterday too in a different setting, but women who are used to tracking their macros, know how to nail their protein, carbs, and fats and fiber like a boss. However, maybe we've been more focused on like those macros, and maybe there's some micronutrients or, foods that maybe we just haven't had for whatever reason and have been kind of defaulting to our usuals. But
Mm.
maybe we're missing out on things like whole eggs or, full fat dairy, foods that would actually supply your body with choline, with those B vitamins, fat soluble vitamins, some ones that are going to be key for just hormonal health as a whole and getting, that ovulatory cycle back. So I think this is like a cool time to like kind of play around with food, too, and think about like what colors, can I add in. I'm big on, and I know Mare is too, but I'm even bigger on some of the woo and sacral chakra. If you are familiar with the chakra system, is associated with fertility. It's going to be like kind of located like over your uterus, and color associated with it is orange. So
Oh.
like for fertility goals and nurturing that sacral chakra, I do recommend like your sweet potatoes, your pumpkins, thinking about carrots, and all of those also have lots of, fiber in them and potassium and other nutrients that your body does absolutely need, again, for fertility goals and beyond.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that because that kind of goes into when we were talking about like blood sugar, but also something else to think about too is like gut health and the fact of
Yeah.
having that diversity with the food that Sarah was saying, the colors and getting creative, super important. And specifically when she was talking about like the orange foods like carrots, etc. It really made me think about the estrobolome. So we're looking at that estrogen metabolism because here again, if our digestive health is not in a great spot, then we're going to be essentially recirculating old, used up, secondhand estrogen. Not, I mean, it's not really that bad, but that's how my brain sees it. And that reabsorption and just kind of, using that old yucky stuff, it can affect our hormonal health and even implantation. So
And
this
how
is
you
where
feel, right? Like, how does that sound? Like old, yucky estrogen.
I know, I really sold it. Everyone's like, "Oh my God!" But like, this is how like powerful. Like, just doing, like she said, like looking after at the base level, looking after the foods that you eat hits so many different things with regards
Right.
to stuff you need.
Water. Are you drinking enough water? Like, because
Oh
we
yeah,
want that estrogen, we want that yucky estrogen to be pooped out, right? And a lot of women are constipated. So making
yeah.
sure like you are having, a regular daily bowel movement. And that is where like also like again we want to think about like if we are going to be supplementing, like what packs like that 1-2 punch. Magnesium, you definitely need it, and it's also going to support, bowel movements. So I think like just not looking at, I say all that because I know this is a time where we want to do all of the things because we want to get pregnant within the year and click, time tick tick tick. Okay, let's not think about like trying to do all of the things, and instead stepping back and focusing in on the things that do like truly matter for your body, because ultimately, like the goal is to help your body feel safe enough to ovulate. And if we are missing key nutrients or we're missing energy, calories as a whole, that's, a huge stress, as is stressing about the perfect diet for fertility, the perfect supplement protocol, the perfect exercise routine, what exactly your husband needs to do for his sperms, and the rabbit holes of research and all of that can be a huge stress. And if your body or if your brain is like always running from this tiger all the time because of all the tabs you have open or all the to-dos and shoulds and worries, that does impact fertility for sure. And that's again where like having practices to support your emotional and spiritual health, therapy, community, like Mary mentioned, I think is also, super, super important during this time. Actually, all of the time, but
Yes.
especially during this time.
Yeah. It's during these times that we realize just how important they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, I think we touched on the timelines, but I would say like giving your body like, okay, so we're gonna have that like 90-day period, of kind of prep. And then, coming off the pill, I would say again, like giving your body like a good, like again, 90 days, 12 to 16 weeks to recover, and using that time to start to get to know your body, knowing that, hey, it is going to take probably a few cycles for ovulation to occur, in the first place, most likely.
Yeah.
And, if after like 3 months we're not seeing those signs, okay, let's look a little bit deeper. And I absolutely would suggest like setting up appointments with your OBGYN, doing all of that, making sure like, you've had appointments with primary care, et cetera, and just kind of setting those up as well too, along this timeline.
Yeah, I think that, and don't quote me on this, but I think like medically, I do think that they say to give yourself a solid year of trying before, again, we think that, hey, I'm not doing all the things or something is wrong. But at the same rate, it's like Sarah said, we are very gas pedal down people, meaning doing our due diligence, not from a fear base, but from a preparation place, right? And so getting those appointments lined up, getting all your health checks, like we've gone over in this podcast, I think are important. But I do want to say that, giving yourself a solid year, especially coming off of birth control, depending on why you were put on, depending on how long you were put on, depending on just your overall health profile, your life, what's happening. I think that that's something that, I do tell my clients. On the flip side, and this is like the other end of it, if something should happen marvelously and you do get pregnant, lickety split, I also, and I know that Sarah feels the same, we would not want you to live in fear that you didn't have this, 6 to 9 month preparation phase. My body wasn't ready. Clearly, I always quote it, but there's Jurassic Park, they say, it will find a way. And we would just want you to feel the utmost confident during that time, regardless of, how soon it happens or not.
Yeah, Mother Nature is amazing. And yeah, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think we just in general, like no matter where you are, like can get caught up in the shoulds, and that is pretty draining. But I think we covered quite a bit here. So is there anything else that you think we forgot or need to mention?
No, I don't. I will say I don't know if you mentioned it, and so if anybody did go or is going to the Legion thing, I don't know if you mentioned it because I was looking up to see if it had choline in it, and so I'm so sorry if you said this, but you do have a discount code that does save them, correct? Can they use that in the sale?
Uh, for new customers, I know it gives you free shipping. So
There you go.
code forward, and it just lets us know you supported the show. But they're
Mhm.
having that BOGO sale right now, yeah, and you can mix and match anything. So if you did need some fish oil, I do really like Triton because it has vitamin E in it.
Oh,
And I'm clearly like big on like getting the deals because what I always tell people about Triton is a serving size is 4 capsules, which is I think 4 grams of fish oil. And efficacious dose is actually like 2. Like you can definitely do more. And we often do suggest that you do like closer to that 4 grams, but you can make a bottle last longer doing the half serving or share with, your partner, or, just family, at the house. So I'm all about that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I'm biased, but I think we nailed this one out of the park or kicked it out of the park. And yeah, hope
Yeah,
everyone
and if
has a
you
great day.
guys like, if you are interested, especially if you're a coach, interested in the birth control topic and don't want to leave your clients with just, oh, just go off the pill or, like fear mongering stuff around the birth control. If you're not about that vibe, you'll definitely want to check out our webinar, the birth control masterclass that we did. It's if you are a member of Fortify Core, you get access to that, but we do have it as a standalone webinar and definitely would recommend checking that out. Or, as a female, this is appropriate, for anyone, no matter where you're at, as far as, education. And if you do need some guidance, because we know, again, like there's a lot of shoulds, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of, does this apply to me? We would love to help you with a strategy session because that's where we can kind of step back and look at your picture, look at your labs if appropriate, and decide like, okay, babe, like big and little F's, for you. This is, let's focus on this. And we'd love to be a part of your team because I don't know. This is where like that community aspect for me, it's like, let's like build your team
Hmm.
with, your practitioners, like your friends, your family, and your coach, for training. Like let's get everyone, kind of on board here with you and your body and make some cool things happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, we appreciate you being here. Like Sarah said, if you do want access to that webinar, it is on our website, which is www.fortify-health.com, and you can go under the education tab. It's also where you can see access to Fortify Core if that's something you're interested, or if you want to hop on a free call, if mentorship is the time for you, then we are happy to do that as well.
Sweet guys, we will see you next time.
Bye.